Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for holding. Welcome and good day to the Asian American Justice Center's Asian Virginia Political Poll conference call. Please note today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Toby Chidari. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for joining today's call. We're going to hear from some community leaders who are going to be urging candidates in Virginia to address important issues facing the fastest growing racial group in the state. We'll also hear a quick preview of a presidential town hall forum that's going to be held on Saturday in-state with Asian American voters. We'll hear from four people today. We're going to hear from Mi Mua, who's the president and executive director of the Asian American Justice Center. We'll hear from Christine Chen, who's the executive director of APIA Vote. We'll hear from Ginny Nguyen, who's the president of Voice of Vietnamese Americans. And we'll hear from Selena Lake, who's a principal at Lake Research Partners and an esteemed pollster. We'll hear brief statements from each of our speakers today, and then we'll open up for questions. You can press *1 on your number pad at any time during the call to get into the question queue. I highly recommend that you do that while the speakers are doing their statements, if you have a question to ask. With that, let's get started. We'll start with Mi Mua. Mi?
Thank you, Toby, and thank you all for joining the call today. Again, my name is Mi Mua, and I'm the president and executive director of the Asian American Justice Center, a member of the Asian American Center for Advancing Justice. We're very proud to be a co-author of this survey and very excited to bring the results to all of you today. AAJC has a long history in working to protect the rights and interests of Asian American voters. We've worked closely with our affiliates, the U.S. Department of Justice, national civil rights partners, community partners, and key stakeholders on a number of initiatives relating to voters and voter protection. A couple of those areas include working on Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act to require jurisdictions to provide bilingual voting assistance to registered voters. We've also done a lot of work in Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that voters get the assistance they need from the person of their choice in order to cast a ballot. We have done a lot of work in the areas of voter protection to ensure that Asian Americans, the votes of Asian Americans are not suppressed. AAJC, in partnership with our coalition partners, have operated and will operate a nationwide voter protection hotline come this election season. And we have attorneys who have done poll monitoring to ensure the rights of Asian Americans are protected. For the 2010 census, we engaged in a lot of redistricting work where we partner with the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund and MALDEF on a national redistricting handbook, and we have worked with local community-based organizations to ensure fair redistricting. We have also engaged in exit polling in different states across the country to determine whether or not the needs of Asian American voters are being met at the polls. And finally, in the courts where AAJC has filed briefs before the U.S. Supreme Court, we've done so on every major case that impacts the protection of Asian Americans in their ability to have their votes count. So this new survey is a major component of our overall work and is particularly important and timely in understanding the Asian American electorate. The fact is, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group in the United States. With over 17 million AAPIs, our community has nearly doubled since 2000. While it is widely known that there are high Asian American populations in states such as California, 15%, New York, 8%, and Hawaii, 57%, the untapped secret is that the Asian American population is growing at an astounding rate, with approximately two-thirds of the states, 36 states, showing growth rates of over 50% since the last census. Now, many of these states play a pivotal role in determining the leadership in the White House and Congress. AAPI voters can and will play an instrumental role in the swing states. So just a few percentage points can determine who wins a particular swing state. For example, Illinois has an AAPI population of 5%, which has shown a 41% growth. Nevada has an AAPI population of 9%, but it has shown a 116% growth, the biggest growth in the United States. Florida has an AAPI population of 3%, but it's experienced a 72% growth. And of course in Virginia, where the AAPI population is 7%, but has experienced a 71% growth. Yet, despite these demographic realities, there's still a lack of outreach from our political leaders and candidates. Our national results have shown that in the last 2 years, only 23% of AAPIs were contacted by the Democratic Party, and only 17% of AAPIs were contacted by the Republican Party. As a former elected official myself, I fully understand the influence the Asian American community has in the electorate today and their potential to change the political landscape of this nation. I also know from practice and experience the political leaders who embed a strategy to engage the Asian American communities as part of their core strategy will be rewarded by margin of victory, yet those who ignore us do so at their own peril. This survey brings to light and to the mainstream electorate the knowledge that many in our communities have known all along. We know current polls are showing that our next president will likely be determined by the slimmest margin. The leadership in Congress is also up for grabs. And as we head into this critical election, I call upon our leaders and future leaders to take note of the AAPI community. For this untapped community can make the difference for a candidate who wants to head to Washington or a party who wants to lead our nation in the White House or in Congress. And now I want to turn this over to Christine Chen.
Hi, good morning. This is Christine Chen. I'm the Executive Director for the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote, API Vote. We're a national nonpartisan organization that works with local community partners to mobilize Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the electoral and civic participation at the national, state, and local levels. We're very focused on developing new capacity among different nonprofits to do this work with each of our local community groups. AAPI voters are the nation's fastest growing racial group and are expected to vote in record numbers this fall. Our voters will support candidates who expect and best engage Asian Americans, a demographic with increasing political clout. We've actually continued to increase our numbers on the voter rolls. For instance, in 2008, 600,000 new Asian American voters entered the electorate. Today, roughly 1 in 4 congressional districts have Asian American Pacific Islander residences above the 5% threshold, and AAPIs exceed 5% of the population in nearly 600 cities and municipalities, and Virginia is no different. Where elections are being won in close margins, it's important to recognize that this constituent base are in various areas in this state. AAPIs now make a significant amount of the population in the 2 most populous counties. Fairfax County has a population of 18%, Loudoun County at 15%. In addition, there's a sizable community located in the Hampton Roads area. In the 2006 U.S. Senate race, Asian Americans made up 3% of the electorate, where U.S. Senator Jim Webb won a margin of less than 1%. We expect these type of close elections in the upcoming Senate race as well. Due to the changing demographics in Virginia, all candidates need to take this opportunity to engage with this new base of voters. Another example is the 2010 congressional race for Virginia 11, where Representative Connolly won just with a difference of 981 votes. There is great enthusiasm to participate in the elections from the AAPI voters, and overwhelmingly majority of Asian Americans surveyed, nearly 5 out of 6, said that they will vote this November, and half of them are more enthusiastic than ever to vote, a trend that has continued from the last few presidential elections. This is actually being demonstrated in our expected turnout for our presidential town hall for this Saturday, July 21st at George Mason University at Fairfax from 3 to 6 p.m. We've actually invited the Obama and Romney campaign to participate, and we are expecting 1,000 AAPI voters from Virginia to turn out. It's an opportunity for both campaigns to focus on talking to Asian American voters and addressing issues that this community cares about. This is actually being held right next door to the Asian Festival, which draws about 75,000 Virginians, and in which voter registration drives are being conducted by nonpartisan nonprofit organizations as well as Asian American Democrats and Republican entities. In addition, we are also streaming this live to about 50 viewing parties across the country where Asian American nonprofits are gathering voters to also watch this live and to better understand what the campaigns actually have to offer and to engage with our voters. And going beyond this weekend, API Vote will continue to work with our Virginia partners and other nonprofits across the country to continue to focus on registering new voters and eliminating barriers to voting. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and introduce one of our partners, Jeannie Nguyen, who's the president of Voice of Vietnamese Americans.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this call. My name is Jeannie Nguyen. I'm the president of Voice of Vietnamese Americans. I'm also the chair of the Asian Real Estate Association of America, chapter in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. And I'm in the executive board of the Virginia Civic Engagement Table, including 26 different nonprofit organizations in Virginia. I'm also in the board of the coalition of APA in Virginia, including 10 or more of APA nonprofit organizations. And we're working in affiliations with the VSA, the Vietnamese Student Association, and many other student associations of universities in Virginia, including George Mason, UVA, VCU, VTech, and many others. We have been working with focus in improving the number of voters in Virginia from the AAPI communities. We also focus in making sure that the voters understand their rights and their rights are protected. We've been working closely with the General Assembly in Virginia and the state board elections. We are still working with them with the current law coming out regarding election rights for the whole state and also especially with AAPI. There have been a lot of concerns regarding language barriers, and many Asian Americans live in pockets with only speaking ethnic languages. And so we've been trying very hard to reach out to these small pockets of Asian Americans, including Vietnamese, Koreans, Taiwanese, Chinese, Hmong, Lao, Cambodians, and many others. So in that focus, Voice of Vietnamese Americans has started out with Census 2010, and during the time with Census 2010, we work at the state level and also local levels. We have groups coming out talking to people in different languages at local areas. We knock on people's door. We call them, we knock on their doors. We come to their mailbox, and we also organize events at churches and pagodas and community centers talking to them. So with that, we move on to redistricting in 2011, and from that we have made connections with many community leaders. Last year, we also had a spatial event at the Library of Congress where we had the Indo-Chinese leaders, including Cambodians, Hmong, Lao, Vietnamese, and we all gathering so that we be in touch. From then on, we have had many Asian American events at many different levels, at the local, at the county, and also at the state level. And actually, Christine, APIA at the national level, had attended one of our events last year at the Fairfax County Government Center. Is the Asian Americans Advocacy Day, and then we also had the Asian Americans Appreciation Day. We appreciated leaders like Christine at the national level. So this year, we actually are focusing on voter registration, and we are doing voter registration throughout the year. We do not do it for elections. It's very significant that Virginia has elections every year, and we also have many special elections throughout the year as well. So we're doing voter registration, and we're educating voters throughout the year. And right now, even though the election is coming in November, we have already begun to educate and plan our work for next year and the year after. So we are continually trying to raise the voter share of Asian Americans in Virginia. And as Christine had mentioned, Virginia has 7% AAPI in our population, but more than that, in North Virginia, in Fairfax, we have 18% Asian Americans. So that's where our work is focusing, and we work very hard to get these Asian Americans register and make sure they vote. We make sure that they understand their voter rights, and we make sure that their rights are protected. We do have people come out and talk in different languages. Just last week, we had a housing event that we had 7 different translators talking 7 different languages, including Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, Hmong, and Taiwanese, and I think English and French have become minorities language at that event. So we're hoping that this coming Saturday, we will also do voter registration. We're hoping that with the support of national APIA votes and also with many other national media outlets and other organizations helping to improve and to create the impact and letting candidates know that Asian Americans are very much concerned about what's going on, affecting the policy, directly affecting their lives. As we do voter survey, the Asian Americans have voiced their concern very much close to the mainstream concerns. Among those are the affordable health care. Many small business Asian Americans need health care, and we need it at the affordable level. So affordable health care is very important to them. It's like the first concern. We're also very much concerned about jobs, and even though many Asian Americans have small businesses, they very much worry about their next generation. Old parents wanted their children to have higher education, better education, and right now many of the new graduates are having a hard time finding jobs, and many Asian Americans in the government branches, in different departments in the government, are concerned about the coming sequestration and about the future of their employment with the federal system, the government system. So we're very much concerned about jobs. That's what we heard from them when we did the survey. And also education is on top of the list. We would like to keep the education tuition affordable. Many parents from Asian American community are working hard to pay their tuition for their children to school, and they ended up with a very high interest rate in the student loans that they had to pay back. When the students graduated from the university and not yet have a job to pay, the parents ended up having to pay the high interest rate on the loans. Many times it's a lot, like some parents I know paying up to $1,500 a month on their student loans for their children, for their 2 children. So that meant a lot to them. All these concerns, sometimes we don't hear from the candidates, from our senators or our congressmen representing us here, and I feel that this will make the differences in how the voters come out and vote. So we would encourage candidates to come out and listen to our Asian Americans this Saturday, the 21st at George Mason. Just last month, we had over 10,000 Vietnamese Americans coming out at the Viet Fest at George Mason. So we know that the Vietnamese Americans will come out, and will come out in big numbers. If you're there and if you try to reach out to us, you will see the difference by the results of the elections this November. Thank you, Christine and all. And at this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Celinda Lake, the principal of the Lake Research Group, to present the findings from the poll.
Thank you very much, and this is a very exciting survey for us. This is part of a nationwide survey that we did of 700 Asian American Pacific Islander voters nationwide. And then we added oversamples in Florida, Illinois, Nevada, and Virginia. And of course, what we're sharing today with you are the Virginia numbers. If we look at slide 3, these are some of the highlights of what we found. First of all, in terms of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, it is far from monolithic. It is a very diverse community, although more in agreement politically than we have ever seen historically. In Virginia, the largest proportions of the population are Indian Americans at 23%, Koreans 22%, and Vietnamese Americans at 17%. Asian Americans are very optimistic in Virginia about the direction of the country, more so than we have seen in other states. And they are very optimistic about their own situation as well, but particularly optimistic about the country. That optimism leads them in part to vote for President Obama, although in slightly lower proportions than we saw nationwide. So 54% of Asian American voters plan to vote for President Obama. 59% nationwide did. More than a quarter are undecided. And what this data shows throughout, and we'll show you all of the data, is that there's really potential for both parties to make major gains here. Both President Obama and the Democratic Party seen very favorably by Asian Americans, but more folks have not yet heard, certainly at the time of the polling, of Mitt Romney. Asian American Pacific Islander voters also voting overwhelmingly Republican in the congressional race, but again, a very large one-third of the vote undecided. So again, while the vote leans Democratic, slightly less so than nationwide, and lots of voters for both parties to go after. President Obama's job approval rating among Asian Americans slightly lower than his approval nationwide. So in Virginia, his approval is net negative by 7 points. Nationwide, the voters were split. In comparing the two parties, voters in Virginia favor the Democratic Party on most of the economic issues, the economy, education, health care, and in fact, again, reflecting their sense of a recovering economy and an innovative economy, of which they're very much a part of. Asian American Pacific Islanders in Virginia give more credit to the Democrats on the economy than they do nationwide. There's also a strong advantage for the Democrats on values, specifically treating all Americans fairly. But AAPI voters much more divided on national security and which party would be better, and much more divided on the budget deficit. And again, a very significant proportion of the population say, I'm not sure what either party is doing. And finally, reinforcing some of what the previous speakers talked about in terms of the program in Virginia, we saw about a fifth of the voters saying that in-language assistance could make a big difference in terms of their voter participation. So if that's the general overview, let us show you some of the data. Turning first to slide 5, we see that 85% of AAPI voters say they are certain, almost certain to vote, 13% probable, and 2% less probable. This is very similar to nationwide numbers that we see, and in Virginia, the AAPI community has had high turnout in the past, in part because of the work that many of the groups on this call have done. The AAPI community in Virginia is an immigrant community, 31% born in the United States, 69% born in another country, but it is a community that has come to the United States at all ages. Very significant pool came as young children, very significant pool, another third about teenagers or young adults, and then a third or a quarter older. On page 7, we see 73% of the AAPI community in Virginia have immigrant parents. And again, this is among registered voters. How do we reach the AAPI community? On slide 8, a valuable slide, I think, for both political parties. First of all, television dominates, and we see that in every state and every part of the country. But then the Internet and social media play a very, very big role. And talking to other folks like Yahoo, we have found in previous work that we've done that targeting the AAPI community on the Internet is actually cheaper. There are a lot of very inexpensive sites that have a lot of traffic from the AAPI community. Newspapers, all of you who are on the phone from the newspaper community know that AAPI community, one of the few communities still reading newspapers. And newspapers and community newspapers, a very important way to reach out to this community. Slide 9. When we asked the Asian Americans in Virginia how do they consume their news, 80% in English, but 1 in 5 at least in some other language. And again, multilingual programs very, very important in terms of outreach, maximizing the turnout, maximizing one's vote in this community. So if that's the lay of the land, how do Asian Americans feel about the United States? And we look at slide 11, and we see much more positive than the national numbers. The AAPI community in Virginia feels that things are generally going in the right direction for the country. And these are some of the most optimistic AAPI voters we saw. They're more tempered about how things are going for themselves, and I think several of the previous speakers talked about many of those barriers, but still net positive in their attitude. Having said that, on slide 12, we see that 71% of the AAPI community in Virginia still say the economy is only just fair or poor. That latter, more than the direction of the country, influences how AAPI voters see the president doing. And so on page 13, we see 46% say the president is doing an excellent or good job, but 53% say just fair or poor. Again, a little bit lower than the national average. On slide 15, we see that Asian American voters very, very positive toward the president, solidly positive toward the president and the Democratic Party. Normally, in most of the states and nationwide, we saw a drop-off between feelings about the president, personal feelings about the president, and personal feelings about the Democratic Party. But here, both are pretty popular, 67%. And that obviously is an important indicator for a number of the races, including the Senate race and congressional races. Mitt Romney, net negative, the Republican Party even more net negative, but there are a substantial number of voters at the time we took this poll, a quarter, who didn't have any impression of Mitt Romney. So there are opportunities for both parties here. And that lack of impression on slide 16, we see the AAPI community voting very strongly for Obama, 54%, only 20% for Romney, but 26% undecided. This could be a strong vote or a tied vote, depending on what happens, and also room for both communities to target. In the 2008 vote, the AAPI community reported that they voted 61% for Obama, 14% for McCain, 11% refused, and 15% said they did not vote in that election. On slide 18, the generic congressional vote, very Democratic, more so, again, than nationwide in terms of the margin, but still 30% undecided. And again, this vote very much up for grabs and could be a tied vote and room for both parties to target these voters. Slide 19, we asked people which party they gave an advantage to. And we see here the Democrats having pretty robust advantage on education, health care, shares your values, and treating all Americans equally. Less of an advantage on immigration. This was before the DREAM Act, and in other polling we've done in Virginia, the DREAM Act very popular in Virginia and may have influenced these numbers. On slide 20, we see a host of issues where the AAPI community less clear about the differences between the parties, including some issues that are very important to the community: foreign policy, taxes, national security, and the deficit. On jobs and the economy, the Asian American population giving the Democrats in Virginia an advantage over the Republicans. These are stronger numbers than we see nationwide, and we see throughout this thread in the Asian American community of being more optimistic about the economy for the country, although still worried about the impact on the economy for themselves. So the last question we asked, if that's the mood, and both parties have lots to gain by targeting the Asian American community, how does that get done? On page 22, we saw that 28% of Asian Americans in Virginia had been contacted by the Democratic Party, 18% by the Republican Party. And while the Democrats have better penetration here, neither party has done very well at reaching these voters, and lots of room for progress. On slide 23, 52% of Asian American voters say they're more enthusiastic about voting this year, but 1 in 5 express less enthusiasm. So there need to be efforts, and there are opportunities here for turnout and persuasion by both parties. On slide 24, in-language assistance could make 1 in 5 Asian American voters more likely to vote. And that includes particularly older members of the Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese American communities. And finally, what difference can all of this make? A whopping difference. This can be the margin of victory in what can be a very close state. So on slide 26, you see if we did projections here, if turnout were similar to 2008, and we had the current margin, there would be a 47,000 vote margin for Obama in the Asian American community. Clearly, in Virginia, that could easily be the margin of victory. By the same token, there's 26% of the vote undecided, signaling opportunities for both parties. So we have here a fascinating and unique look at a very, very important constituency nationwide and in Virginia, and in fact the first study of its kind. We see that this is a very nuanced population, opportunities for both parties here, and both parties need to engage this community more, help with turnout, and bring in-language assistance to the voting booth to maximize the turnout and their vote in this community. So let me turn it back to folks at AAPI, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. So this is Toby again. Just press *1 on your number pad if you've got a question. In the meantime, if you had trouble accessing the presentation for whatever reason, the presentation is available as a PDF online. I'll give you all the URL for that PDF. It's http://x.co/POLL1. That's x.co/poll1. That's all lowercase. So if you couldn't get the webinar, you can get a PDF of the presentation right there. But with that, let's take our first question. We'll take it from the Washington Examiner. Steve, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you for having this call and for releasing this data. One of the questions that has come up in many other ethnic communities is concern about some of the voter restrictions and some of the voter ID laws that have passed not only in Virginia but in other states as well. Is that an issue that you guys as well have seen it could come up in this election, and or do you have concerns with those laws as well?
Hi, yes, this is Christine Chen with API Vote. Yes, we've actually been very concerned. For instance, we've actually been conducting 10 trainings across the country for our nonprofit organizers and volunteers because every state has really changed and updated their laws, and some for the better, some for the worse. And so for even the volunteers who we're relying on to actually educate and reach out to especially to our first-time voters, they're even having a hard time sometimes understanding what's actually happening. And, especially with the voter ID laws about what are the different rules and regulations, especially if you're a first-time voter versus or if you've actually moved. I know Asian American Justice Center is also keeping track of the various laws and regulations as well.
Yes, this is Jimmy Nguyen. At the grassroots level, we also work very hard to first make sure that the law comes out protecting the rights of the voters, especially the ethnic community. So we have worked since last year with the state legislations in Virginia, the General Assembly, to make sure that they don't include the voter ID photos in there, because many of our Asian Americans, Korean Americans, Vietnamese Americans may not have a photo that is acceptable per standard as government photos. So that has been decided, and that's not included in the new rules in Virginia, which is a good thing. And we also are still working with the state board elections, and also at the same time educating our ethnic minority communities about the new rules coming out. We are also working to have, I think it was a good thing that the new law will come out that in our new voter registration card, there will be a package with explanations of the rules, what is expected of them to take to the poll so they can vote. And we are hosting many small community events teaching the community about the new rules, and hopefully between now until November, voters will be more informed.
And so I want to remind folks, star one if you want to ask a question. One quick point to note is that there's been a 71% growth rate in the number of Asian Americans in Virginia from 2000 to 2010. And at least from the 2008 elections, of Virginia's eligible Asian Americans who are registered to vote, the citizen voting age Asian Americans, of the population, that portion is 71.7%, so about 72% are actually registered to vote in Virginia. So we'll take the next question then from Shane Smith with Mason Votes.
Hi, thank you. My question was about the in-language assistance. How are the groups on the call going about trying to ensure that ballots are in different languages for those maybe older voters in the AAPI voting block? So just talk about a little bit about what your efforts are in working with the Virginia Board of Elections or the legislature.
Yes, this is Jeannie Nguyen from Virginia. I must say that we did not have adequate support from the governor or from the State Board of Elections, because last month we did sit as a group of Virginia City Engagement Table talking to the State Board of Elections, and we did raise a question about languages, and we were told that they do not have much budget for it. I am in Fairfax County, and Fairfax does have good program, and they're trying to provide translator and interpreters to certain services. And we work up until now. We've been doing volunteering work with no pay, no budget. We have received no funding to us at all. So then it's on our own that we go to events, we go to churches, pagodas, and we go to senior homes and explain our help with languages. But we felt that we could use more support from the state level and from the federal level. I am doing broadcasting in Vietnamese to Vietnamese radio twice a week, specifically about elections, and we do it on our own with no funding. We're also trying to write and translate all the laws and regulations and even issues into Vietnamese and have it posted on the internet, printed on Vietnamese media. But we do it on our own. And the magazines that doing that for us, sometimes they sacrifice too. They're doing that for the community, for the good of the community. They're not getting paid enough. And many times they don't even get contacted by the government or by the campaign, different campaigns at all. So I feel that this is a lack of focus from the candidates, from any campaigns, and even from the state board elections. We have come to them. We have suggested, we offer help, and they haven't reached out to us adequately.
This is me more with the Asian American Justice Center. The Justice Center will be tracking the different jurisdictions that are required under the Voting Rights Act to implement under Section 203 the jurisdictions that are required to provide bilingual voting assistance to registered voters. We also know that under Section 208, voters are supposed to be able to get language assistance. And so in these different areas, we're closely monitoring, specifically in the states where has been such a tremendous growth in the Asian American population. We'll be working closely with our local partners to monitor where there are discrepancies in the election officials in the states as well as in the county units that are supposed to be providing this. And that will be one of the areas that we will be looking to take corrective action as we look into the midterm elections. But we're very aware that the law provides some requirements for government actors to have to implement in order to provide the kind of access that they're supposed to, and we'll be monitoring that. The story here, though, is that when the election officials or the election entities who are responsible for providing the kind of in-language assistance that the community needs in order to exercise their franchise fails, the community then must come up with their own private resources to fill that void. But we can only do so much into the language assistance if we don't have the cooperation and the help of the local entities to provide the ballots in the appropriate languages, even with where the floor is relating to Section 203. So we will be monitoring the implementation, particularly Section 203 jurisdictions, as we move forward.
This is Christine with API Vote. Also, another strategy that a lot of our community partners are implementing into their campaigns is to really push out early voting and absentee voting. So that way, for those who are limited English, they can actually get their family members and others to actually help them in filling out the ballots. In addition, we're also trying to educate people about their own rights, about how they can actually get assistance and bring someone to the polls to actually help them with that as well.
So I'm afraid that we've actually hit our time limit. A couple of notes in closing. I think you all heard Christine talk about it earlier, but there will be a presidential town hall event on Saturday. There will be more details released about that soon. Both of the campaigns are engaged in conversations. Neither have announced which representative they will be sending, but we do know that former Cabinet Secretary Norm Mineta will be there not representing either campaign to just talk about the Asian American vote. So look out for details for that. In addition, if you have any questions or if you need more details about the poll or a copy of the presentation, please don't hesitate to give me a call or an email. I think most of you have my email address, but just in case, you can use Toby, T-O-B-Y, at tobiko.us, Toby at tobico.us. Otherwise, thanks for joining today's call, and we look forward to continuing this conversation with many of you. Thanks again.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our conference call for today. Thank you for your participation.